What's good, YouTube? I'm here to showcase my Branded Despia deck that I took to the Duelist Cup Stage 2 with. So I'm going to start with the deck list right now, beginning with Despian Comedy. So people might think this card is like mediocre, but I think it's a fine card to send it off of Branded Fusion, especially when you already resolved Despian Tragedy, because you can help with avoiding effect negations or, infinite impermanence. Any card that like target negates your, I'm trying to find the card, Loop Bellion. So that's the reason I find this card worthy to still have in your deck for a Despia deck. Three Tragedies, the best card to pair up with any of your cost materials when it comes to like Allure of Darkness, Branded Fusion, Brandon and Red, Brandon and Opening. Like there's a bunch of cards, and also what's just so fantastic about this card as well is you can banish this card from your graveyard and target one branded spell and trap in your graveyard, set it to your field. Great recursion with all of your fusion spells. Branded and Red, Branded Fusion, just great. So yeah, that's why we run three. Also, it's just great too because since in this meta we're currently in, there's a lot of milling going on, especially from your opponent, and this card will always resolve when it's milled, adding to your hand, so you can add like Alibur and such. So yeah, great card. Always have to run it at 3. I'm not sure why people like to run it at 2. Always had me curious about that. Moving on, we have 2 Maxis, 2 Ash Blossoms. We run 2 of each because it's just I find it to be the best ratio because this deck doesn't really need hand traps like that. We already got like decent enough board breakers. Alibur, not Alibur. Mirror Jade is just a great card. Like it can pretty much like get rid of any type of monster with protection. Alibur fusions away, super poly. So yeah, I don't find the need to run multiple hand traps like that, especially 3 copies. And the worst thing that always happens is when you open up with multiple hand traps of the same type. So I just want to minimize that as much as possible. 2 Edgem Chains because we have those with the Fright for Patchwork. So that's the reason that's in here. Also great discard fodder because when it's discarded, it can search a Fright for Patchwork, which then gets you another one with a poly. So, yeah, great engine. Like, it helps with the Despia deck so much. 2 Fallen of Alabazes. I only run 2 because I find that you never want to open up your hand with any of them. You always want to have them in your deck. It's not terrible if you have them in your hand if you're going second, but when going first, you definitely don't want to see this in your hand because you can't do anything with it. So, yeah, that's why I run 2. Alibur, 2 of that. Maximum copies, the best fusion searcher in the whole archetype, basically. So, run max copies at all times. Also, a great graveyard effect that whenever your fusion monster leaves the field, you can special summon this and negate the targeted monster's effect until the end of the turn. Great protection. So, yeah, just the best Despian card. I run 1 Ecclesia because I find it to be just a good resource recursion because people usually think of this card with Sword Souls because Sword Souls you can special summon it and it just helps with like special summoning the rest of the Sword Souls. But it's actually I find it to be really good in Despian Branded Despia as well because she has that effect where during the end phase of a fusion monster was sent to the graveyard, add this card from the graveyard to your hand, which will always resolve if you get Mirror Jade on the field because Mirror Jade's effect sends a fusion monster to the graveyard. So you always get this back to your hand. And again, a problem with this deck, with the Branded Despia deck in general, is just you're always discarding, or you're usually discarding, which limits your resources a lot, which fusion decks highly need their resources or else you're not going to be doing much. So yeah, great card. I run 1 Tri-Brigade Mercurier, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, because it's just a good search off of either Branded Lost or the Bergrand, the Glory Dragon, especially when you have Mirror Jade up, just a good hand trap. Also, it helps with that it pairs nicely with the Allure of Darkness because when this is banished, you can search the Fallen of Albaz, which again we just always want to have resources in our hand because if you run out of resources in your hand in a Branded Despia deck, you're pretty much gonna lose. That's like the bread and butter of how this deck works. Is the resources just overwhelms your opponent. 2 Springen's Kit, because ever since the semi-limited Aluber, we needed more ways to get to Branded Fusion, because if we don't open up with Branded Fusion, or we don't activate Branded Fusion in your turn 1 play, your chances of winning the duel, like, significantly lowers. So we won 2 Springen's Kit. Now we got 1 Dramaturge of Despia. I find it to be a good card when going second, only because it helps with OTKing. And occasionally the effect negation comes up, but it's also worth it when you're going first too, because usually our turn 1 going first boards in the Branded Despia decks are not that good. But it's still nice. Like if you open up with it, it's still nice. It's a good like material for any fusion monster, and then you just get in the gate, so that helps. Good card. I still see a reason to run 1 of it. Libiton, I run 1 as well because it's just a great recursion card. When your board's already been broken or something, you can get back your Mirror Jade or any fusion monsters really. So it just helps with all of that. You're never ever going to be using the first effect during the main phase. You can make all your opponents, make all your monsters currently in the field gain attack equal to their own level. I said all. It's all monsters, not just yours. I'm a typical Yu-Gi-Oh player, not reading carefully what it's saying. But yeah, we mostly use it for the second effect of recurring all the fusion monsters. Usually you want to fusion it off with Branded in red on your follow-up turn for whenever you set up with your plays. So yeah, always just a great card. Harpy's Feather Duster. I actually do want Harpy's Feather Duster in this deck because I find the back row decks to actually be a problem against Branded Fusion, Branded Despia. So we just need the Harpy's Feather Duster, because outside of Guardian Chimera, you don't really have a way to pop or interact with your opponent's back row. So I do find the need to run Feather Duster. 2 Polymerizations. This goes along with the Patchwork engine, so just a great card. It's a fusion deck, so works perfectly. 2 Allure of Darkness helps thin out the deck. We have some cards that can pair up with it that gives us the bonus effect, so you're not really like neutraling, like net neutral, whatever you're banishing off your hand. So just a good card. 3 Branded Fusion, the bread and butter of this whole deck, the whole reason why it's even like able to compete with other top tier decks. Yeah, I don't think there's much explaining left to do for that. Branded Loss. I actually recently just added this card because I actually do find it helps with going second, because there are definitely moments where your opponent already has a full board of negates, and the whole plan is to just have Branded Fusion resolve, and if it doesn't, then like it makes it so much harder to win the game. With Branded and Lost, the worst case scenario is they negate this. If they read it carefully, they're gonna have to negate this card, because this card protects your fusion summons from being negated, and the best case scenario is it eats up a negation. So that's like the whole reason that I find it to be really good. Super Polymerization, literally the best board breaker in the game. You can break going second, you just break any board. Even going first, you can just set this and then stop your opponent from like breaking your board. Just such a great card. I completely understand why it's semi-limited, and yeah, there's really no other reason for that. 2 Call by the Grave, because the biggest weakness for this deck that if people wanted to counter this deck is to have Ash Blossom, because unfortunately Branded Lost does not protect your Branded Fusion from Ash Blossom, so we need the Call by the Grave. Just crazy broken card that every deck runs, and this deck definitely needs it as well. But you definitely want to prioritize Ash Blossom. Sometimes I would see people, and like when I see my opponents running Despia deck, that they'll do this on a Max C, and that's just like, it doesn't matter, because what's nice about this deck is you don't special summon a lot, so you can just leave the Max C alone and just really hold this on only for Ash Blossom. Two branded opening, we have those because it's just a good starter. Helps us get to Alibur, which helps us get into branded fusion, and has protection when it's in the graveyard, because you banish it and it protects any destruction-based effects on your fusion monsters. So good card. Definitely another reason why it's semi-limited. Branded in red, a good follow-up card because usually this is the card you search after sending Albion to the grave off of Mirror Jade, and this is what you usually want to pair with Libiton. So this is what helps you recur basically like your whole board again, and for that reason we run two. Two branded banishments. We run one. It's a great card. Another disruption. It's kind of similar off of Branded in red. What's nice is like when Branded in red has already been used up, or let's say it's already in your opening hand, or even when this is in your opening hand. This is like basically like the partner of like what you want with these two cards because they're just good disruption tool during your opponent's turn. And then finally we have Branded Retribution. And originally I did not like this card. I didn't think it was like worthy of playing. But then like I was realizing how much you need a hand resource in this deck. So I feel like the first part of the effect with negating the effects of special summon monsters, like it's nice if it does resolves, like it's something, and it's really not that bad because it can kind of help with the two fusion monsters in your graveyard, which helps you recycle your graveyard, which I'll get into because I know some people might look at my ratios on my extra deck and be thinking he doesn't know what he's doing, but I'll get into that later. What's really nice about this card, and the reason I'm definitely like it's definitely a staple in the deck, is the graveyard effect of targeting one branded spell and trap in your graveyard added to your hand. Just great because it recurs all your monsters, your spells and traps, which is exactly like what Tragedy does. But that's the thing, Tragedy, if like you already resolved one of its effect, because you can only use one of its effect per turn. This is just like covers that base and helps you like do a lot more on one of your turns. So yeah, that's why I run this card. Onto the extra deck, we have the Mud Dragon of the Swamp. Just literally a target for Super Poly, and I actually will say that I'm considering cutting this because recently I have not, like it's been a while since I've actually summoned this because this card is very format dependent, and a lot of the format right now is like very monotone or just like I don't know. Usually the boards I see when I have Super Poly, their boards never allow me to make Mud Dragon. So yeah, I still have it though because like very occasionally it will come up. Speaking of very occasionally, or I should say specific format dependent, Earth Golem. Only reason we run it was for Sprite decks because they always end on Masquerena, if I'm pronouncing that right, the IP one, and Sprite Elf. So for that reason, that's literally why we run this card. Great helps breaking their board. Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. Definitely run this. I know some people like to run the Predaplant card, which I could see it's a nice card as well, but this card I find to be a little better because two dark monsters is more generic, so it ends up resolving a little bit more off of Super Poly. And what actually was really nice about Starving Venom is the attack boost, because I find it specifically against the Mathmech Ignister decks always ends on that huge tower, that Link 6 tower. Usually gets to like 6,000, 5,000 attack, and nothing unaffected. Only way to run through it is through battle. So you would run this card, and it actually helps because it will target it, gain its attack, and you can run over it. And then after that, you pretty much beat the Mathmech Ignister deck. So this definitely a great card. And this is like I think that's like the added reason why I preferred this card over the Predaplant card. We got Brigand of the Glory Dragon, literally just another target off of Mirror Jade. Usually I search the Mercurier off of it. One Albion. We have one Albion because it's the best card. And this is probably the part where people might wonder why I only run one. It's because I just don't want to craft the other one. I definitely do need the second one, but I've been climbing just fine. I mean, I made it to stage 2 literally with this deck list, and I'm already like in the 5,000 ranks in the stage 2. So yeah, definitely always the first target you wanna make or send off with Mirror Jade. and always want to search out whatever branded in red or branded punishment off of it. I don't know, depending on the situation, you just always, the search is just too valuable. So yeah, one of the best send-offs for Mirror Jade. The Despian Quaridus, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Just a good card. It's usually when I'm going first, my hand is not too good, that doesn't allow me to get into Mirror Jade. And I have like a Despia and a Palmerization or something in my hand. Usually I'll make this going first because it just secures that I'll live till next turn more than any other card, like the Masquerade, which I'll get into in a little bit. Because when it leaves the field, you can special summon something like a Despian card or Fallen of Albaz. Usually I go for the Fallen of Albaz because this is what usually happens, is it leaves the field while they have like an extra deck monster. And then that's how we get into Mirror Jade. So yeah, I think this card is still good to run in the deck because I know some people cut it off. Yeah, that's the reason I run that. And then two Masquerades because just another great card. This is like always like at this point it turned into like a secure lock of like, I'm gonna win this game because I'm gonna end off my turn with one or two Masquerades. The tax, the pay 600 effect, just you do your damage, keep your opponent's life points low, and then summon this. They can only play like a couple of cards a turn, and then yeah, again, you kind of have to be smart with summoning this because you only want to summon it again when you kind of know, like, okay, like I know their deck special summons a lot, like a Pendulum deck, even a Sprite decks, like they resolve like 6 or 5 effects before they really get into like their end board or a board to break your board, because this is just like what secures your game. Two Mirror Jades. The whole point of Branded Fusion to get into this card. Great card. I don't really know if I need to like explain what this card does, because if you play this game, you know what this card pretty much does. Banishing one monster, non-targeting, too good. Then it has like the destruction effect if it leaves the field. Yeah, just two Mirror Jades because in case something happens to the first one. Two Libellions, the card you always want to go to off of Branded Fusion because of the whole one dark monster, and that's why we send like Tragedy or something. Just a good card. I think the only thing to really note about this is like when to leave it in an attack position and when to leave it in a defense position, because it's good to know that when you leave it in an attack position and its effects are negated, you can still attack with it. Because if you resolve its effect or something, you can't attack with it. That's why usually people fusion it off. But yeah, that's something to like really keep in mind with. And yeah, we run two in case something happens to the first one. Two Guardian Chimeras, and I've run two of this because literally it has to do with the whole back row decks. I've definitely come across some back row decks that like this. The matchup is not great. Like I feel like you only win against those type of decks when you go first, because back row decks are like a lot more powerful when they go first. So when you go first, not only are you stopping them from like setting up their board and everything, but you can also like you're already setting up. Usually you're ending off your turn with a Brandon in red or something, which is just the perfect card to go into Guardian Chimera. That's how you like pop their back row along with their Harpy's Feather Duster. But of course you're not always going to see this. But yeah, and I definitely like, especially in back row decks or control decks, this card always comes up at 2. Like I always summon this twice, and it's just very helpful. Now if I had another Albion, I would definitely take this card out more than anything, because this is kind of a win more card. It's not really like it is format dependent, I will say too, because like if there's like for example the name of that deck is slipping me right now. It's the one they kind of pair with Sprite too. Live Twin. Live Twin is a dark and light deck, and that's actually like the best scenario with this card, because you can summon this with just any Despian card, Super Poly, get rid of 2 of their monsters, and you got it. And it's a nice effect too. Like this card is still good. It's just you're not summoning this a lot because it's very like specific. It takes up a lot of resources and everything if you want to summon it from only your materials, but definitely still comes up very occasionally with Super Poly. So yeah, that's my whole deck list, and now we're gonna go into the replays. Alright, so now looking at the deck replays, let's go into match history, and I'll show you 3 games that I played recently to just show you how the climb's been going. We'll start off with the most recent one. So this lasted 3 turns. They don't allow you to confirm the opponent's deck because I would really like to showcase what the opponent was running. But unfortunately, during Duelist Cups, they don't allow that. A feature that they really need to add, because if they're gonna make it very competitive with this Duelist Cup nature, they should at least allow us to confirm the opponent's deck. Also be nice with the hands. So I started off with Branded Opening, discarding the Edge Imp Chain to get the bonus effect of getting another spell card. And I actually do this during the draw phase because sometimes people playing Droll, and Droll can really only resolves when it happens on the main phase. So that's why if I ever open with Branded Opening, I do it during the draw phase or the standby phase. So yeah, get Aluber because there was no maxi or anything. I get to resolve the 2 effects. Never mind, they have the Imperm, so they actually stop my Aluber from searching the Branded Fusion. Very unfortunate. Still get the Patchwork. We can speed this up a little bit. Standby phase, main phase. Patchwork still resolves. Get more resources into our hands because that's definitely what we want to do with this type of deck. Unfortunately, go for the Allure Darkness. Unfortunately, I have to discard Edge Imp Chain. I open up with another Branded Opening, which is not good because it's a once per turn effect. So I think I go for Fusion. Yeah, get into Despian Quaritus. This is what I was talking about before in my deck profile, that usually I'll end on this if the opponent is at 8,000 life points. It's the first turn, because I highly doubt, especially if they use the hand trap already, then they definitely won't have full combo where they can go above and beyond. So that's why I don't go into the Masquerade. This gives us more protection. Then we set the Branded of Red, Branded at Opening, and we have to keep this card because we won't be able to resolve it since we have no fusion monsters in the graveyard, because you definitely don't want to use the first effect to return to an extra deck monster one face up fusion monster you control. So we keep it in hand to discard it off of Branded Opening. Oh, and then we see running Ecclesia, yeah, running Sword Soul. So then in my head, I'm like, okay, they're going to most likely try to OTK us because that's what they can do, especially when they open up Ecclesia like that. So I just let it ride, them getting the Moye and everything. But then they go into Draco Berserker, so I'm like, okay, they're definitely going full force with the OTK. They get the Sourcil Tai, then they get the Baxia, and then this is when I realized, okay, so I got to be careful with how I'm going to chain the resolved of my spell and trap, because they're going for the back row, so they're definitely going to, attack and then do all that. But Quaritus actually change the attack of all monsters currently on the field to 0 until the end of the turn, except for level 8 and higher fusion monsters. So I don't know if he read that properly or something, because I don't know how he's going to OTK me with an effect like that. But in my head, I was thinking, okay, he's probably going to bait that out, and then he has a Longying in the hand, the one that can go into level 10 synchros. So I decide to chain and hopefully find a way to really end this all off with not Aluber. I'm forgetting Fallen of Albaz when they negate. But we have to see, so I go for Brandon of Red. Of course, he had the Call by the Grave, so this definitely wasn't going to work out. I discard that to just protect myself even more in case he really does have the Longying. I activate that because I know he's going to go into the battle phase. Of course, they negate it, but it doesn't negate the effect. And it's nice because once he activates that means I'm going to get my Fallen of Albaz. And this is why I think this Branded Retribution is just a great card, because this came up where you can banish this card from the graveyard, target one branded spell and trap from your graveyard, add it to your hand. Again, we discard a lot with the majority of our cards, so we just need stuff to put back into our hand, because Fallen of Albaz's effect requires you to discard a card. Right, so then this is going to get banished. Monsters go to 0. Fallen of Albaz. Fallen of Albaz is going to resolve. And then I get to go into Mirror Jade. They're going to have to pass the turn, and then because of that, Mirror Jade, I get to send off my Albion. Albion gets to activate its effect, add Branded Fusion to hand, and then the Ecclesia, how I was saying before, adds it back to our hand. we have a hand to work with, and now we can start going in for the OTK because right, he has nothing on board basically. So Branded Fusion, Lubellion, discard Ecclesia, you can activate the Tragedy, add monsters. These two cards are perfect because they can normal summon, special summon the kit. I try to activate the effect, forgetting the Call by the Grave, but this is enough on board to basically go for the OTK, and that's one game. Right, so going into the second game, we're not going to look at this game because I remember they forfeited like on turn 1, because like I opened up really good, and they just saw like there was no reason to play their turn 2. So usually if you see turn 1s, I'm not going to be playing those replays, as again they happen turn 1, they just forfeit. We're going to look into this replay. So they go first. This is Stu person. Thankfully I have the hand traps. He opens up with Sigma, maxi it. Hopefully he doesn't have Call by the Grave. He doesn't. This resolves. He's still gonna go for his XYZ. Goes for the search. I can Ash it. And I thought I looked pretty good until I saw the Triple Tactics talent. He's gonna shuffle my Branded Fusion, and now I just gotta hope I draw something that can enable me to start comboing. Unfortunately, I didn't. I drew the hand trap, or basically something that would pair nicely with Allure of Darkness. So I believe I just set here. Yeah, I set the Branded Banishment, because at this point, since I already know I have the Max C, I'm